My name is Jessica Reynolds, and I'm 34 years old. Last Christmas, my sister Natalie stood up at our family dinner table, pointed her finger directly at me, and screamed, "Give back the $88,000 you stole from Mom, or you'll never see her again." The room went silent. 20 pairs of eyes stared at me in shock. My husband squeezed my hand under the table as I calmly reached for my phone. What happened next changed our family forever. Where are you watching from today? I'd love to know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if family drama stories resonate with you. Growing up, I always felt a special connection with my parents, particularly my mother, Linda. We shared the same laugh, the same passion for mystery novels, and the same inability to carry a tune. My father, Robert, often joked that we were carbon copies, separated only by 30 years and a different taste in music. This close bond continued into adulthood, with weekly Sunday dinners and daily phone calls that kept us connected despite busy schedules and life's inevitable complications. Natalie, my sister who's 3 years younger than me, had a different relationship with our parents. From her teenage years, she seemed to view family as an obligation rather than a source of comfort. While I cherished our family gatherings, Natalie would arrive late, leave early, and spend most of her time checking her phone or making sarcastic comments. I always chalked it up to her free spirit personality, believing she'd eventually grow out of it and discover the importance of family. Everything changed 2 years ago when my mother started showing signs of early-stage dementia. At first, it was small things, forgetting where she'd placed her reading glasses or mixing up appointments. Then it progressed to more concerning lapses, like forgetting to turn off the stove or getting lost while driving to the grocery store. She'd visited weekly for 20 years. The diagnosis was heartbreaking but not unexpected. The neurologist explained that while the progression would be slow, Mom would eventually need full-time care. As the reality of my mother's condition set in, my father struggled with his own health issues. His arthritis had worsened to the point where managing their finances and household became increasingly difficult. After several family discussions, my parents agreed to let me help manage their affairs. I set up joint accounts so I could monitor their finances, pay their bills, and ensure they weren't falling victim to scams that often target elderly individuals. My husband Kevin was incredibly supportive during this transition. Despite our busy lives with our 2 children, Emma, who was 10, and Lucas, who was 7, Kevin encouraged me to spend whatever time was necessary to help my parents. "Family comes first," he'd always say, reminding me that our children were learning valuable lessons about caring for loved ones through my example. Natalie's response to our mother's diagnosis was starkly different. She visited less frequently, claiming her job as a marketing consultant kept her too busy to make the 2-hour drive from Charlotte to our hometown of Raleigh. When she did visit, she seemed uncomfortable around Mom, avoiding direct conversations about her condition or future care plans. During one particularly difficult family meeting about long-term care options, Natalie excused herself halfway through, claiming she had an important client call. "She's just processing it differently," my father would say, always giving Natalie the benefit of the doubt. "Not everyone can face illness head-on like you can, Jessica." But as months passed, I noticed a troubling pattern. Natalie's rare visits often coincided with times when my parents received their pension payments or when significant financial decisions needed to be made. She began questioning my management of their accounts, insinuating that I was taking advantage of my position. These accusations were initially subtle, masked as concern for our parents' well-being. "Don't you think it's a conflict of interest for you to have access to their money?" she asked during one visit, loud enough for my father to hear from the next room. "I'm just saying there should be some oversight." The irony wasn't lost on me. Natalie, who had borrowed thousands from our parents throughout her 20s for business ventures that never materialized, was suddenly concerned about financial propriety. These loans were never repaid, always forgiven by our generous parents, who wanted to support her entrepreneurial spirit. About 6 months before that fateful Christmas dinner, I noticed small discrepancies in my parents' accounts. Initially, I attributed these irregularities to my mother's condition. Perhaps she was withdrawing cash and forgetting about it. To address this, I began keeping more detailed records, documenting every transaction with notes about its purpose. During this time, my parents moved into a senior living community that offered independent apartments with available assistance when needed. The move was necessary but expensive, further straining their finances. I worked diligently to ensure they could afford quality care while preserving their dignity and independence. As Christmas approached, I decided to host the holiday dinner at my home. My parents' apartment was too small for our extended family, and I wanted to ease their burden while creating a special memory for what might be one of Mom's last Christmases, with clear recognition of everyone. I spent weeks planning the perfect menu, incorporating all our family favorites: my mother's famous cranberry sauce, my grandmother's sweet potato casserole, and my father's special eggnog recipe. Natalie called 3 days before Christmas, asking if she could bring her new boyfriend, Michael, to dinner. Though surprised by this last-minute request, I happily agreed, hoping this relationship might be a positive influence on my sister. Perhaps having someone special in her life would help her reconnect with the family and recognize the importance of these moments together. Little did I know that this Christmas dinner, which I had planned with such care and optimism, would become the stage for the most shocking confrontation our family had ever witnessed. Christmas morning arrived with a blanket of fresh snow covering our neighborhood, creating the perfect backdrop for the holiday festivities. I woke up early, buzzing with both excitement and anxiety. The dining room table was already set with our grandmother's china, crystal glasses polished to perfection, and name cards written in my best calligraphy. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine, a combination that always transported me back to the magical Christmases of my childhood. Kevin and the kids helped me all morning, making sure everything was perfect. Lucas arranged pine cones and holly branches for the centerpiece, while Emma carefully folded elaborate napkin swans she'd learned from a YouTube tutorial. Kevin tackled the 20-pound turkey, his annual responsibility that he took very seriously. "You're going to wear out the floor with all that pacing," Kevin joked as I made my 15th trip from kitchen to dining room. "Everything looks amazing. Jess, your parents are going to love it." My parents arrived first, at exactly 1 o'clock. Dad helped Mom up the front steps, his hand gently supporting her elbow. Despite her condition, Mom had dressed beautifully in a red cashmere sweater I'd given her last Christmas, her silver hair styled perfectly. For a moment, seeing her smile as she entered our home, it was easy to forget the challenges we'd been facing. "Jessica, sweetheart, the house looks like something from a magazine," Mom exclaimed, her eyes twinkling as she took in the decorations. Dad gave me a warm hug, whispering, "You've outdone yourself, kiddo." The rest of the family arrived in quick succession. My Aunt Patricia and Uncle George came bearing homemade pies. My cousins Amber and Tyler brought their spouses and children, filling our home with the chaotic energy that only kids high on holiday excitement can create. My father's sister Barbara and her husband Charles drove in from Virginia, bringing Mom's favorite Belgian chocolates. By 3 o'clock, everyone had arrived except Natalie and her new boyfriend. The appetizers were dwindling, and I was checking my phone repeatedly, wondering if they had gotten lost or stuck in holiday traffic. "Should we call her?" Mom asked, her forehead creasing with worry. Maybe they had car trouble. Just as I was about to dial Natalie's number, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find my sister looking stunning in a designer dress I'd never seen before, standing next to a tall, handsome man with a carefully trimmed beard and expensive-looking watch. "Sorry we're late," Natalie said, not sounding particularly apologetic. Traffic was a nightmare. She introduced Michael Rodriguez as her boyfriend of 3 months, mentioning casually that he worked in finance, without providing specifics. From the moment they entered, something felt off. Natalie seemed unusually interested in engaging with our extended family, moving from person to person with an intensity I hadn't seen before. She spoke in hushed tones with Aunt Patricia, glanced repeatedly in my direction, and made a point of helping Mom to the bathroom, something she typically avoided. Michael remained charming but aloof, answering questions about his background vaguely, and redirecting conversations to other topics. I noticed him studying our family photos with particular interest, especially the ones of my parents in front of their old house. As we gathered around the table for dinner, the initial atmosphere was pleasant, filled with the usual holiday small talk about jobs, children's accomplishments, and plans for the new year. Mom was having a good day, recognizing everyone and even telling her favorite Christmas story about the year Dad dressed as Santa and got stuck in our chimney. I was just bringing out the turkey when I noticed Natalie whispering something to Michael. He nodded subtly, then checked his watch. A moment later, Natalie stood up, tapping her glass with a spoon for attention. My heart sank, anticipating an impromptu engagement announcement, or some other surprise that would hijack the carefully orchestrated dinner. What came next was far worse than I could have imagined. "I have something important to say," Natalie announced, her voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. "I've recently discovered something disturbing about our family finances." My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while Mom looked confused. I froze, carving knife in hand, as Natalie continued. "For the past 2 years, Jessica has had access to Mom and Dad's accounts," she said, her voice growing louder. "And in that time, over $88,000 has mysteriously disappeared." Gasps echoed around the table. Aunt Patricia covered her mouth in shock, while Uncle George's face reddened. My cousins exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Natalie, what are you talking about?" my father asked, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm talking about theft, Dad," Natalie replied, her eyes never leaving my face. "I've seen the bank statements. Large transfers to accounts I can only assume belong to Jessica. Money that was meant for your care, for your future." Then, pointing her finger directly at me, she screamed, "Give back the $88,000 you stole from Mom, or you'll never see her again?" The room went completely silent. 20 pairs of eyes stared at me in shock and confusion. The only sound was the Christmas music playing softly in the background, now a jarring contrast to the tension filling the room. My mother began to cry, her hands shaking as she reached for my father's arm. "Robert, what is she saying? What about our money?" I felt as though I'd been plunged into ice water. The accusation was so outrageous, so completely untrue, that for a moment I couldn't even find words to respond. My heart pounded in my ears as tears threatened to form. Kevin stood up beside me, his face flushed with anger. "How dare you come into our home and make these accusations on Christmas Day? In front of your mother, no less." "Stay out of this, Kevin," Natalie snapped. "You've probably benefited from the stolen money, too. Nice kitchen renovation you did last year. Wonder where that money came from." Aunt Patricia was now comforting my sobbing mother, while Uncle George and my father were engaged in intense whispered conversation. My cousins looked uncomfortable, clearly wishing they could escape this unexpected family drama. I felt Kevin's hand on my shoulder, steadying me. Taking a deep breath, I carefully set down the carving knife and reached for my purse hanging on the back of my chair. With deliberate calmness that belied the storm raging inside me, I pulled out my phone. "You want to talk about bank statements?" "Natalie?" I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Let's talk about them." As I unlocked my phone, Natalie's confident expression faltered slightly. Michael shifted in his seat, suddenly very interested in his empty plate. "What are you doing?" Natalie demanded, her voice now carrying a hint of uncertainty. "I'm about to show everyone exactly what's been happening with Mom and Dad's money," I replied. "And I don't think you're going to like what they learn." My hands trembled slightly as I navigated to my banking app, but my resolve was unshakable. The dining room remained eerily silent except for my mother's quiet sniffles and the faint Christmas music still playing in the background. I connected my phone to our TV screen using AirPlay so everyone could clearly see what I was about to reveal. 8 months ago, I began, my voice growing stronger with each word. I noticed small discrepancies in Mom and Dad's accounts. At first, I thought it was just Mom forgetting about withdrawals she'd made. I glanced at my mother, whose confused expression broke my heart. I started monitoring their accounts more closely, keeping detailed records of every penny going in and out. The banking app loaded, displaying a spreadsheet I'd meticulously maintained documenting my parents' finances. I scrolled through the organized columns showing dates, transactions, balances, and notes. As you can see, I continued, pointing to the screen, I've recorded everything. Their pension deposits, social security payments, medical expenses, rent, for the senior community, utilities, groceries, everything. Kevin stood beside me, his presence giving me strength. Jessica has spent countless hours managing your parents' finances. He addressed the room. She's set up automatic payments for their bills, researched the best Medicare supplements, even negotiated with the senior living community to get them a better rate. I appreciated Kevin's support, but I needed to focus on the evidence. I pulled up another document, this one showing a pattern I'd discovered months ago but had been reluctant to confront. In April, I noticed something odd, I explained, highlighting several transactions. Small withdrawals, usually between $100 and $500, made from ATMs near Mom and Dad's community. The strange thing was, neither of them remembered making these withdrawals. Uncle George leaned forward, adjusting his glasses to see the screen better. So, you think someone was using their cards without permission? At first, I wasn't sure, I replied honestly. Mom's memory issues made it difficult to determine if she simply forgot. So I did something I probably should have done sooner. I pulled up a series of emails between myself and my parents' bank. I contacted their bank and requested security, camera footage from the ATMs where these withdrawals were made. Natalie shifted uncomfortably in her seat, while Michael checked his watch again, looking increasingly anxious. The bank was initially reluctant to provide footage, citing privacy concerns, I continued. But given Mom's documented cognitive decline and my status as their financial caretaker, they eventually agreed to review the footage internally and confirm the identity of the person making withdrawals. I pulled up an email from the bank's fraud department and enlarged it on the screen. This email confirms that the person making these unauthorized withdrawals was identified as Natalie Reynolds, I stated, my voice cracking slightly as I said, my sister's name. The withdrawals coincided perfectly with her visits to Mom and Dad. Gasps erupted around the table. Aunt Patricia covered her mouth in shock, while my father's face grew ashen. Michael edged his chair slightly away from Natalie, whose face had drained of color. That's ridiculous, Natalie sputtered, her confident demeanor crumbling. Those emails could be faked. You're just trying to cover your tracks. Then perhaps you can explain this, I countered, pulling up another document. After discovering the ATM withdrawals, I installed a financial monitoring service on their accounts. It tracks everything and sends alerts for unusual activity. I showed the family a series of alerts highlighting suspicious transactions, online transfers, mobile check deposits with their account information, and electronic payments to various creditors, all made when my parents were demonstrably elsewhere, often during their medical appointments. But the most damning evidence, I continued, scrolling to another document, came 3 months ago when I hired a private financial investigator. This revelation caused Natalie to stand up abruptly. You had no right, she exclaimed. I had every right, I replied firmly. As Mom and Dad's designated financial caretaker, it's my responsibility to protect their assets. The investigator's report detailed how someone had accessed my parents' online banking using their personal information to create duplicate login credentials. The access points traced back to IP addresses matching Natalie's home and office. Furthermore, the report showed transfers to accounts under Natalie's name, as well as payments to credit card companies and what appeared to be gambling websites. The total amount taken over the past 18 months, I stated, looking directly at Natalie, is indeed close to $88,000. But I wasn't the one taking it. My mother began sobbing more intensely, burying her face in my father's shoulder. Dad looked completely shell-shocked, his eyes darting between me and Natalie as if trying to make sense of this devastating revelation. There's one more thing, I said quietly, pulling up a voice recording on my phone. After discovering all this, I contacted Mom and Dad's bank again, this time recording the conversation with their permission. I pressed play, and the bank representative's voice filled the room. "Yes, Ms. Reynolds. We can confirm that your sister, Natalie, has been making unauthorized withdrawals and transfers from your parents' accounts. We have her on camera at multiple ATM locations, and the electronic transfers trace back to devices registered to her. We're prepared to cooperate fully with law enforcement if you choose to pursue this matter." The recording ended, leaving a deafening silence in its wake. Every eye in the room turned to Natalie, who now looked cornered and desperate. "You don't understand," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was going to pay it back. I just needed it temporarily." "For what, Natalie?" my father asked, his voice laden with pain and betrayal. "What was so important that you had to steal from your own parents?" Natalie glanced at Michael, who was now staring intently at his phone, clearly wishing to be anywhere else. "I had debts," she murmured. "Bad investments, some loans that came due. Then I tried to win it back, and things just got worse." "So you decided to steal from Mom and Dad?" I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. "From Mom, who might not even fully understand what's happening to her own money? How could you? It was easier than I thought it would be," Natalie admitted, tears finally forming in her eyes. "Mom would sign anything I put in front of her, and I figured with her condition, no one would believe her if she said anything." This cold calculation sent a chill through the room. Aunt Patricia made a small sound of disgust, while Uncle George shook his head in disbelief. "And then you came here today?" I continued. "To my home, on Christmas, to accuse me of the very thing you've been doing. Why, Natalie? Did you think a preemptive strike would somehow work?" "Michael said it was the best strategy," Natalie replied weakly, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. "Get ahead of the story. Make you look like the villain before you could expose me." All eyes turned to Michael, who was now standing and collecting his coat. "I think I should go," he said awkwardly, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "Yes, I think you should," Kevin responded firmly, walking to the front door to show him out. As Michael left, the full weight of what had transpired seemed to crash down on Natalie. Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time since I could remember, she looked genuinely remorseful. "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered. "The first time was just a small withdrawal. Mom gave me her card to pick up her prescription, and I took out a little extra. It seemed so easy, and I was desperate, then it just snowballed." My father, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout this revelation, finally spoke up. "How could you do this to us, Natalie? To your mother? After everything we've sacrificed for you over the years?" The pain in his voice seemed to pierce through Natalie's defenses. She collapsed back into her chair, finally letting her tears flow freely. "I'm sorry," she repeated over and over. "I'm so sorry." The Christmas dinner lay forgotten on the table as our family grappled with this devastating truth. What should have been a joyful celebration had transformed into a moment that would forever change our family dynamic. I looked around at the shocked and hurt faces of my extended family, at my devastated parents, and finally at my sobbing sister. Despite the vindication I felt at clearing my name, there was no satisfaction in this moment, only profound sadness for what our family had become. The next hour unfolded like a scene from a courtroom drama, with my dining room table serving as the witness stand. As the initial shock subsided, questions began pouring out from every family member present. Aunt Patricia wanted to know when the theft had started. Uncle George asked about the exact amount taken. My cousins sat in stunned silence, occasionally exchanging whispered comments. Throughout it all, my parents' reactions tore at my heart. Mom drifted between clarity and confusion, sometimes grasping the full implications of Natalie's betrayal, other times asking innocent questions that indicated she'd momentarily forgotten what was happening. Dad, always the family pillar of strength, seemed to physically diminish before our eyes, his shoulders hunched with the weight of his younger daughter's betrayal. "I need everyone to see exactly what happened," I said, feeling it was important for the family to understand the full scope of the deception. I projected my phone screen onto our TV again and opened a folder containing security footage the bank had eventually provided. The video quality wasn't perfect, but there was no mistaking Natalie's face as she made withdrawals from various ATMs, using our mother's card. In one particularly disturbing clip from 3 months ago, she was actually helping Mom out of the car at her doctor's appointment, then telling her to go ahead while she got something from the car. The footage then showed Natalie rushing to a nearby ATM, making a withdrawal, and returning to the medical building. This was the same day Mom needed to pay for her new medication, I explained quietly. She called me later, confused about why there wasn't enough money in her account. My father covered his face with his hands, unable to watch anymore. "Turn it off, please," he whispered. I immediately complied, feeling sick about causing him additional pain. "There's something else you should all know," I continued reluctantly. "The money Natalie took wasn't just from their checking account. She also emptied a certificate of deposit that was meant to cover Mom's long-term care expenses." This revelation seemed to finally break through to my mother. "The nursing home money?" she asked, her voice suddenly clear and focused. "The money we saved for when I get worse? That's gone too?" The naked vulnerability in her question hung in the air. Everyone knew that with her condition, quality memory care would eventually be necessary and extremely expensive. "Not all of it," I assured her quickly. "I discovered the withdrawal in time to stop about half of it, and I've been setting aside money from my own savings to help rebuild the fund." Kevin squeezed my hand under the table. This was something we hadn't discussed with anyone, not even my parents. We'd been quietly contributing to replace what Natalie had taken, cutting back on our own expenses to help secure my mother's future care. Natalie, who had been sitting silently with tears streaming down her face, looked up at this. "You've been replacing the money? With your own?" "What did you expect me to do?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Let Mom go without proper care when the time comes? Someone had to fix this, Natalie." Michael had left about 15 minutes earlier, mumbling excuses about a family emergency. His hasty departure only confirmed what I'd suspected. He'd been fully aware of Natalie's scheme and had likely encouraged it. Before leaving, he'd whispered something to Natalie that made her face pale even further. "Did you know? My father?" suddenly asked Natalie, his voice barely audible. "Did you know about your mother's condition when you started taking our money?" The question hung heavy in the air. Everyone knew its significance. Taking advantage of an elderly person was bad enough, but exploiting someone with cognitive decline added another layer of cruelty to the act. "I told myself she wouldn't miss it," Natalie admitted, her voice small. "That she probably wouldn't remember having the money in the first place." The collective intake of breath around the table reflected everyone's horror at this admission. Aunt Patricia, who had been relatively quiet until now, stood up with such force that her chair tipped backward. "How dare you?" she shouted, pointing at Natalie. "Your own mother, the woman who stayed up nights when you were sick, who worked 2 jobs to pay for your college, who has never been anything but supportive of your every whim and mistake." Uncle George gently pulled his wife back into her seat, but her outburst seemed to open the floodgates. Other family members began expressing their shock and disappointment, some in hushed tones, others more vehemently. Throughout the commotion, I watched my mother closely. Her expression had shifted from confusion to a deep, penetrating sadness that broke my heart. Despite her cognitive challenges, in this moment she seemed to fully comprehend the magnitude of what had happened. "Why didn't you just ask us for help?" she said to Natalie, cutting through the noise of multiple conversations. "We would have helped you if we could." The simplicity and love in her question silenced the room. It struck at the core truth that made Natalie's actions so painful. Our parents had always been generous to a fault, especially with Natalie. "I was too ashamed," Natalie confessed, meeting our mother's gaze for the first time. The debts were from gambling. It started small, just poker nights with friends. Then online betting. I kept thinking I could win it all back and no one would ever know. My father, who had remained uncharacteristically silent, finally spoke. "How much do you owe, Natalie? Beyond what you took from us?" Natalie hesitated before responding. "About 30,000 in credit card debt. And there's a loan shark who's been threatening me. That's why Michael thought we should try to blame Jessica. He said if we created enough doubt about who took the money, maybe you'd give me more to replace what was supposedly stolen." The calculated nature of this plan stunned everyone. I remembered how confidently Natalie had made her accusation, how she'd played on our mother's confusion and our father's trust. The premeditation made it all the more painful. "I think," my father said slowly, his voice heavy with emotion, "that you should leave now, Natalie. I need time to process this." Natalie looked panicked. "But Dad, where am I supposed to go? Michael will be furious that this didn't work. He's probably clearing out our apartment right now. I have nowhere else." "You should have thought about that before stealing from your parents and trying to frame your sister," Kevin interjected firmly. "Actions have consequences, Natalie." An uncomfortable silence descended on the room as Natalie gathered her purse and coat. The Christmas dinner sat cold and forgotten on the table, a visual reminder of how thoroughly the holiday had been ruined. As she reached the door, Natalie turned back. "Jessica, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. And, Mom, Dad, I never meant to hurt you like this." No one responded. What could anyone say in the face of such a profound breach of trust? The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow felt more final than a slam would have. After Natalie left, the remaining family members sat in stunned silence. The cheerful Christmas music, which no one had thought to turn off, created an almost surreal contrast to the somber mood. My cousin Amber was the first to break the silence. "Should someone go after her? Make sure she's okay?" "She made her choices," Aunt Patricia replied sharply. "Jessica and your parents are the ones who need support right now." I moved to sit beside my mother, taking her trembling hands in mine. "I'm so sorry you had to learn about this today, especially like this. I was trying to figure out how to handle it without causing you pain." "My sweet, protective girl," Mom said, reaching up to touch my cheek. "Always trying to shield everyone else." Despite her condition, in this moment she was fully present, her eyes clear and focused on my face. "But some things can't be fixed without first bringing them into the light." My father nodded in agreement, his expression a complex mixture of grief, betrayal, and exhaustion. "We need to decide what to do next," he said pragmatically, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. "About the money, about Natalie, about everything." As the family began discussing options, ranging from legal action to family therapy, I felt the weight of the past months lifting slightly. The truth, however painful, was finally out in the open. We could now face this crisis together, as a family, without secrets or false accusations hanging over us. The Christmas dinner might have been ruined, but something more important had been preserved. The trust between me and my parents, and the knowledge that even in our darkest moments, truth has a way of coming to light. The days following Christmas unfolded in a blur of emotional conversations, legal consultations, and family emergencies. By the evening of December 25th, most of our extended family had left, expressing their support but clearly uncomfortable with the dramatic turn the holiday had taken. Only Aunt Patricia and Uncle George remained, helping us clean up the untouched Christmas dinner and offering their unwavering support. My mother, overwhelmed by the day's revelations, experienced what her doctor later described as emotional stress triggering cognitive symptoms. Her confusion worsened dramatically, and by midnight she couldn't recognize Uncle George, a man she'd known for over 40 years. My father wasn't faring much better, his blood pressure dangerously elevated despite his medication. "We need to get them somewhere quiet," Kevin suggested, watching my father struggle to catch his breath after climbing the stairs to our guest room. This environment, with all these reminders of what happened, isn't helping either of them. By the next morning, we had made a difficult decision. My parents would temporarily move into our home, rather than returning to their senior living apartment. Their community was beautiful and supportive, but I feared the gossip that might follow them after Natalie's actions became known. More importantly, I wanted them close where I could monitor their health and emotional well-being. Late in the afternoon of December 26th, as Kevin and I were helping my parents settle into our home, my phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown, but somehow I knew it was related to Natalie. "Jessica Reynolds?" a deep male voice asked when I answered. "This is Detective Martinez with the Raleigh Police Department. We have your sister Natalie here at the E station. She's been brought in regarding some concerning financial activities." My heart sank. Despite everything, Natalie was still my sister. "Is she under arrest?" I asked, moving to a different room so my parents wouldn't overhear. "Not at this time," the detective replied, "but she's admitted to unauthorized access of your parents' accounts and is making some concerning claims about threats from creditors. She's asked for you specifically." 45 minutes later, I found myself sitting across from Natalie in a small room at the police station. She looked terrible, hair unwashed, makeup smeared, still wearing the same outfit from Christmas dinner. The confident, stylish sister I'd always known was nowhere to be seen. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, unable to meet my eyes. "I didn't know who else to call." "What happened, Natalie?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral despite the complex emotions churning inside me. "After I left your house, I went back to my apartment to find Michael clearing it out. Just like I feared," she explained. "When I confronted him, he admitted he never cared about me. He was only with me because he thought I had access to substantial family money." Her voice cracked. "He said now that my cash cow was gone, so was he. Under different circumstances, I might have felt vindicated by this revelation about Michael's true character. Instead, I just felt sad for my sister, who seemed to have a talent for making terrible choices in both relationships and finances." "That doesn't explain why you're at the police station," I pointed out. Natalie's eyes filled with fresh tears. "After Michael left, 2 men showed up at my apartment. They work for someone I owe money to, someone who doesn't take IOUs. They said my time was up and made some pretty explicit threats about what would happen if I didn't pay by the end of the week." "So you called the police?" I asked, somewhat surprised that she'd taken such a responsible step. She shook her head. "No, I panicked. I went to Mom and Dad's apartment thinking I could find something else to sell or pawn. The building security guard recognized me but realized I didn't have permission to be there without Mom or Dad present. He called the police." I closed my eyes, trying to process this new low. Even after being exposed, even after seeing the pain she'd caused our parents, Natalie's first instinct had been to try to steal more from them. "The detective said you've admitted to taking the money," I said after a moment. Natalie nodded. "I told them everything. About the withdrawals, the online transfers, using Mom's confusion to get her to sign things. They want to know if you and Mom and Dad want to press charges." The question hung heavily between us. Part of me wanted Natalie to face legal consequences for her actions, to understand the severity of what she'd done. Another part recoiled at the thought of my sister with a criminal record, of family dirty laundry being aired in court. "I can't make that decision alone," I finally said. "This affects Mom and Dad primarily. It's their money, their trust that was violated. They'll never forgive me," Natalie whispered, a fresh tear trailing down her cheek. "You don't know that," I replied, surprising myself with the gentleness in my voice. "They're hurt and shocked, but they love you. They've always loved you, sometimes, to a fault." The detective eventually explained that regardless of our family's wishes, the Financial Crimes Division would likely pursue certain charges due to the exploitation of a vulnerable adult with cognitive impairment. However, our cooperation and preferences would strongly influence how the case proceeded. I left the station with a promise to discuss options with my parents and our lawyer, and with Natalie's shattered expression burned into my memory. When I returned home, I found Kevin sitting with my parents in our living room, looking through old family photo albums. The normalcy of the scene, contrasted with the chaos of recent events, brought tears to my eyes. "Your father had the idea to look at happy memories," Kevin explained softly as I joined them. "He thought it might help your mom feel more grounded." Dad looked up, his expression weary but determined. "We can't change what's happened, but we can remind ourselves of the good times, of who we really are as a family." I settled beside them, watching as Mom pointed to pictures from our childhood. Natalie and me building sandcastles at the beach, opening presents on Christmas mornings long past, smiling in matching dresses at a cousin's wedding. In each photo, we looked like the perfect happy family we once believed ourselves to be. "Natalie was brought in by the police," I said gently, feeling they needed to know. I explained the situation, including the decision they would need to make about pressing charges. "My baby girl in jail?" Mom whispered, her eyes filling with tears. Even now, after everything, her maternal instinct to protect was strong. Dad took longer to respond, his expression troubled. "She stole from us, Linda. Used your condition against you. Tried to blame Jessica. Those aren't the actions of someone who made a simple mistake." "She's still our daughter," Mom insisted. "And Jessica is our daughter too," Dad replied firmly. "A daughter who's sacrificed to help us, who's been honest and caring. Don't we owe it to her to see justice done?" The conversation continued late into the night, with no clear resolution. My parents' positions seemed to shift hourly. One moment determined to hold Natalie accountable, the next worried about her well-being and future. The following days brought new complications. Our family lawyer, Marcus Blackwell, confirmed that the situation was serious, particularly given Mom's vulnerable status. "Financial elder abuse carries significant penalties," he explained during a consultation in our living room. "The fact that Natalie is a family member actually makes it worse in the eyes of the law, not better. It's a breach of fiduciary duty and trust." We also learned that Natalie's financial problems extended far beyond what she'd admitted. The loan shark was actually a legitimate business that specialized in high-interest loans to desperate people with bad credit. They had a legal right to pursue collection, though their methods apparently skirted the edges of intimidation. Meanwhile, the stress continued to take a toll on my parents' health. Dad developed chest pains that sent us rushing to the emergency room in the middle of the night, terrified he was having a heart attack. Thankfully, tests revealed it was severe anxiety, not cardiac issues, but the incident emphasized how deeply the situation was affecting him. Mom's cognitive symptoms fluctuated wildly. Some days she was almost her old self, asking insightful questions about the legal proceedings and expressing appropriate anger about Natalie's betrayal. Other days she couldn't remember why Natalie wasn't visiting and would ask repeatedly when she would see her younger daughter. Through it all, Kevin remained my rock, managing our household and caring for our children when I couldn't. Emma and Lucas, though confused about why Grandma and Grandpa were suddenly living with us, and why everyone seemed so sad, showed remarkable sensitivity for children their age. "Mommy, I gave Grandma my special bunny to sleep with," Lucas told me one evening, referring to the stuffed animal he couldn't sleep without since infancy. "She looked sad, and Bunny always makes me feel better when I'm sad." These small moments of grace amid the crisis kept me going when exhaustion and heartbreak threatened to overwhelm me. A week after Christmas, Natalie called from a friend's apartment, where she was temporarily staying. "I've been thinking about what I've done, about how to make things right," she said, her voice subdued. "I want to turn myself in formally, plead guilty to whatever charges they recommend. I don't want Mom and Dad to have to testify or be involved any more than necessary." The decision seemed to represent the first truly responsible choice Natalie had made in years. "Are you sure?" I asked. This will mean a criminal record, possibly even jail time. I'm sure, she replied. I need to face consequences. Real ones. Not just empty apologies. Maybe then I can start to forgive myself for what I've done to all of you. When I relayed this conversation to my parents, their reactions were mixed. Mom cried, still struggling to reconcile this situation with her maternal instincts. Dad sat quietly for a long time before finally speaking. Tell her we appreciate her taking responsibility, he said slowly. It doesn't fix what's broken, but it's a start. That night, as I lay in bed exhausted but unable to sleep, Kevin rolled over and wrapped his arm around me. You're holding up so well, he murmured against my hair. Taking care of everyone. Someone has to, I whispered back. Just don't forget that you're allowed to fall apart sometimes too, he said. You don't have to be strong every minute of every day. His permission was all it took. The tears I'd been holding back for days finally came, and I sobbed against his chest until my throat was raw and my eyes burned. For the money taken, for my parents' shattered trust, for the sister I'd lost long before her theft was discovered, and for the family that would never be the same again. January arrived with a blanket of fresh snow and the heavy responsibility of navigating our family's new reality. The legal process moved forward with methodical precision, each step taking us further from the life we'd known before that fateful Christmas dinner. Natalie formally pleaded guilty to financial exploitation of vulnerable adults and theft by deception, charges that carried potential prison time. The prosecutor, a compassionate woman named Diana Gonzalez, took into account our family's wishes to minimize my parents' involvement and stress. We're not looking to destroy your sister's life, Ms. Gonzalez explained during a meeting at her office. But the court takes elder financial abuse very seriously, especially when it involves someone with cognitive impairment. The first court appearance was scheduled for January 15th. Despite my parents' fragile health, they insisted on attending. Mom had experienced a series of good days, her confusion lessened by the new medication her neurologist had prescribed. Dad, though still struggling with stress-induced hypertension, was determined to face this situation head-on. I need to see this through, he insisted when I suggested they could stay home. For my own peace of mind, and to show support for you, Jessica. The courthouse was imposing, its marble columns and high ceilings designed to inspire both awe and anxiety. We arrived early, finding seats in the courtroom while avoiding the curious stares of others waiting for their cases to be called. When Natalie entered with her court-appointed attorney, I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer clothes and carefully applied makeup. Instead, she wore a simple navy blue dress, her hair pulled back in a modest ponytail, her face bare of cosmetics and marked by dark circles under her eyes. She didn't look at us immediately, focusing instead on the paperwork her attorney was explaining. When she finally raised her head and saw our family sitting together in the second row, her composure briefly cracked. She made a small gesture, something between a wave and an aborted reach in our direction, before her attorney gently redirected her attention to the judge's bench. The proceedings were mercifully brief. The judge, an older woman with silver hair and piercing eyes, reviewed the charges and Natalie's guilty plea. She asked several pointed questions about Natalie's understanding of the consequences of her actions, particularly regarding the exploitation of our mother's condition. Yes, Your Honor, Natalie replied, her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. I fully understand that I took advantage of my mother's cognitive impairment for my own financial gain. It was wrong on every level, and I make no excuses for my behavior. The judge nodded, then addressed the courtroom. Before I pronounce sentencing, I'd like to hear from the victims if they wish to make a statement. My father stood slowly, leaning heavily on his cane. The courtroom fell silent as he made his way to the designated spot near the judge's bench. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his reading glasses. Your Honor, he began, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in weeks. I stand before you not just as a victim of financial theft, but as a father whose heart has been broken by the actions of his daughter." He described the trust that had been violated, the particular pain of knowing that Natalie had exploited her mother's condition, and the damage done to our family bonds. Yet, remarkably, his statement contained no vindictiveness, no call for harsh punishment. "I do not wish to see my daughter incarcerated," he concluded. "What I wish for is her rehabilitation, her return to the person I believe she can still be. I ask the court to focus on restitution and recovery rather than retribution." When Dad returned to his seat, Mom squeezed his hand tightly, tears streaming down her face. I leaned over to embrace them both, overwhelmed by my father's capacity for grace in the face of such deep betrayal. The judge considered Dad's statement thoughtfully before pronouncing her sentence. 3 years probation, mandatory financial, counseling and addiction treatment for gambling, 200 hours of community service specifically working with elderly individuals, and full restitution of the stolen funds. "Ms. Reynolds," the judge addressed Natalie directly, "you are being given an opportunity that many in your position do not receive. Your family's compassion has spared you incarceration, but make no mistake, violation of any terms of your probation will result in immediate imprisonment. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Natalie responded clearly. "I understand and am grateful for the chance to make amends." As we left the courthouse, Natalie approached us hesitantly, her attorney hovering protectively nearby. "Can I speak with you?" she asked, her eyes moving from our parents to me and back again. Dad nodded, and we moved to a quiet corner of the lobby. For a moment, no one spoke. The gulf between us seemed both vast and intimate simultaneously, filled with shared history and recent pain. "I don't have the words to express how sorry I am," Natalie finally said, her voice breaking. "What I did was unforgivable. I wouldn't blame any of you if you never wanted to see me again. Yet here we are," Dad replied quietly. "Still your family, despite everything." Mom, who had been unusually quiet throughout the proceedings, suddenly reached out and took Natalie's hand. "We have a long road ahead," she said, her voice clearer than it had been in days. "Trust is earned, not given, but you will always be my daughter." This simple statement, delivered with such clarity during one of Mom's good moments, seemed to affect Natalie more deeply than the court proceedings. She broke down completely, sobbing in a way that suggested real remorse rather than self-pity. We drove home. I reflected on the complex emotions of the day. There was relief that the legal aspects were largely resolved, satisfaction that Natalie would face appropriate consequences, and a tentative hope that perhaps, with time and effort, some form of family relationship might be salvaged. The weeks following the court hearing brought practical challenges. Working with our lawyer, Marcus Blackwell, I established additional legal protections for my parents' remaining assets. We created an irrevocable trust with clear oversight provisions, ensuring that their finances would be protected regardless of who was managing them. This arrangement provides multiple layers of security, Marcus explained as we finalized the paperwork. Even if someone gained access to their accounts, they couldn't transfer funds without multiple approvals. We also took steps to address the reality of Mom's progressing condition. After consulting with specialists, we decided to move my parents from their senior living apartment into a memory care facility that could provide appropriate support as Mom's needs increased. The facility, Willow Creek Gardens, offered beautiful surroundings and specialized care while allowing them to maintain as much independence as possible. "This place feels like a home, not an institution," Dad remarked during our tour, watching. Residents engaged in art therapy in a sun-filled common room. "I think your mother will be happy here." Financing this move required careful planning. The money Natalie had stolen would be repaid gradually through her court-ordered restitution, but we needed immediate solutions. Kevin and I decided to use a portion of our savings, combined with selling my parents' remaining investments, to secure their place at Willow Creek. "We can build our savings back," Kevin assured me when I expressed concern about depleting our children's college funds. Your parents need this now. It's the right choice. Throughout this period, Natalie remained on the periphery of our lives. Her probation officer reported that she was complying with all requirements, attending gambling addiction meetings, and working at a senior center for her community service hours. She sent handwritten letters to our parents each week, never asking to visit but simply sharing her progress and expressing continued remorse. 3 months after the court hearing, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Jessica, it's Michael Rodriguez." The sound of his voice instantly transported me back to that Christmas dinner. "What do you want?" I asked coldly. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from," he replied, sounding uncomfortable. "But I need to tell you something about Natalie's debts." According to Michael, he had originally introduced Natalie to the loan sharks she'd become indebted to. Now, feeling guilty about his role in the situation, he had paid off a significant portion of what she owed. "It doesn't excuse what I did," he said, "but I wanted to make it right in some small way." I was skeptical of his sudden attack of conscience, but verified his claim through Natalie's probation officer. It appeared to be legitimate, which meant that Natalie could focus her financial resources on repaying our parents rather than dangerous creditors. By April, we had settled into new routines. My parents were adjusting well to Willow Creek Gardens, with Dad becoming unexpectedly involved in the facility's resident council, and Mom responding positively to their specialized memory care program. Kevin and I visited several times a week, often bringing Emma and Lucas, who enjoyed the facility's pet therapy dogs and friendly staff. One Sunday afternoon, as we were preparing to leave after a pleasant visit, Dad pulled me aside. "I've been thinking about Natalie," he said quietly. "About forgiveness." My heart tightened. "Dad, you don't have to rush that process. What she did was serious." He nodded thoughtfully. "I know, and I'm not suggesting we pretend it never happened. But I've been watching your mother. Even with her memory issues, she asks about Natalie. Misses her." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'm not getting any younger, Jessica. None of us are. I don't want to leave this world with unresolved bitterness in my heart." 2 weeks later, under carefully controlled circumstances and with my cautious support, my parents met with Natalie at a neutral location, a private room at their facility's cafeteria. I remained nearby but gave them privacy for this delicate union. When I returned after an hour, I found the three of them looking emotionally exhausted but somehow lighter. No miracle reconciliation had occurred, but a door had been opened, allowing for the possibility of a new kind of relationship. One built on honest accountability rather than denial and secrecy. "She's really trying," Dad told me later. The counseling seems to be helping her understand why she did what she did. The gambling addiction, the need for approval, the resentment she felt toward you for being the good daughter. None of it excuses her actions, but understanding the why is important for all of us. As spring blossomed into summer, our family continued the slow, painful process of healing. The legal consequences, financial protections, and emotional boundaries we had established created a framework within which trust might eventually be rebuilt. Not the blind, unconditional trust of before, but something more mature and realistic. In the end, the revelation that had shattered our family at Christmas also forced us to confront long-ignored issues and rebuild on a more honest foundation. The path to justice had been painful but necessary, leading us toward a resolution that honored truth while leaving room for redemption. The summer solstice arrived, marking 6 months since that life-altering Christmas dinner. Half a year had passed since Natalie's shocking accusation and the subsequent revelation of her theft. 6 months of legal proceedings, financial reorganization, and emotional processing that had forever changed our family dynamic. On this longest day of the year, I sat on the porch of our home, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks. Kevin brought me a glass of iced tea and settled into the chair beside me, our shoulders touching comfortably. Penny for your thoughts? He asked, noticing my contemplative mood. I was just thinking about how much has changed, I replied. 6 months ago, I couldn't imagine ever feeling peaceful again. Now, I gestured to the tranquil scene before us. Here we are. The healing process had been neither quick nor linear. There were days when anger would resurface unexpectedly, bringing with it the sharp pain of betrayal. There were nights when I'd lie awake, replaying the events in my mind, wondering if I could have prevented what happened or discovered Natalie's theft sooner. Therapy had been instrumental in my journey. Dr. Samantha Wilson, a compassionate psychologist, specializing in family trauma, helped me navigate the complex emotions of being both a victim and a caretaker in the aftermath of Natalie's actions. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or condoning, she reminded me during one particularly difficult session. It means releasing the power that anger has over you. It's something you do for yourself, not necessarily for the person who hurt you. This perspective helped me separate my own healing process from the question of my relationship with Natalie. I could work on releasing my anger without feeling pressured to restore our sisterly bond before I was ready. My parents' journey had taken its own unique path. Mom's cognitive condition continued to progress, but the consistent environment and specialized care at Willow Creek Gardens had stabilized her symptoms somewhat. There were still good days and bad days, moments of clarity and periods of confusion. On her better days, she spoke of Natalie with a mother's complicated love, neither excusing the betrayal nor rejecting her younger daughter. Dad had surprised us all with his resilience. After the initial health crisis triggered by the stress of discovery, he had gradually regained his strength, both physical and emotional. He joined a support group for spouses of dementia patients, finding solace and practical advice from others walking a similar path. Your father has become quite the advocate, Mom's primary care doctor told me during a checkup visit. He's helping other families navigate the financial aspects of long-term care, sharing his hard-earned wisdom about protecting vulnerable loved ones. This new purpose seemed to energize Dad, giving him a way to transform his painful experience into something that could help others. He even contributed to an educational brochure about financial elder abuse, working with the facility's social services department to raise awareness. Natalie herself had shown signs of genuine change. The court-mandated counseling had evolved into voluntary therapy sessions that she continued even after fulfilling her legal requirements. She maintained her sobriety from gambling, earned a promotion at the accounting firm where she'd found employment after completing her community service, and faithfully made her monthly restitution payments. Our relationship remained tentative, built on careful boundaries and measured expectations. We spoke on the phone every few weeks, met occasionally for coffee in public places, and exchanged emails that gradually became less formal and strained. There were moments when glimpses of our old sisterly connection would surface, only to retreat, again behind the protective walls we had both constructed. I don't expect you to ever fully trust me again, Natalie said during one of our coffee meetings. I wouldn't in your position. But I want you to know that I'm committed to being trustworthy, even if the trust never comes. Her words reflected a maturity that had been notably absent before. Whether this change would prove lasting remained to be seen, but I allowed myself to feel cautiously hopeful. The financial aftermath had presented its own challenges. Despite Natalie's consistent restitution payments, the full amount would take years to recover. Kevin and I had made peace with our decision to use a portion of our savings to secure my parents' place at Willow Creek Gardens, knowing that their security and quality of life took precedence over our financial comfort. Unexpectedly, this financial strain had led to positive changes in our family's approach to money. Emma and Lucas, though young, absorbed valuable lessons about financial responsibility, the importance of saving, and the dangers of secrecy within relationships. Mom, can we put some of my allowance in Grandma and Grandpa's fund? Lucas asked. One day, his small face serious as he clutched his piggy bank. The gesture brought tears to my eyes, not just for its sweetness, but for the values it reflected. As the months passed, we established new family traditions to replace the painful memories of last Christmas. Instead of large, formal gatherings, we created smaller, more intimate celebrations that accommodated Mom's needs and respected our collective emotional bandwidth. Our first Easter together at Willow Creek Gardens featured a simple meal, colorful decorations made by Emma and Lucas, and a sense of gentle healing that felt like a precious gift. Throughout this journey, I discovered reserves of strength I hadn't known I possessed. The woman who had stood shell-shocked at her dining room table 6 months ago had grown into someone capable of navigating complex legal systems, advocating fiercely for vulnerable parents, setting healthy boundaries, and still finding capacity for compassion. This personal growth extended to my marriage as well. Kevin and I had always been partners, but the crisis had deepened our connection, forcing us to communicate more openly about everything from finances to family loyalties to our fears for the future. "We're stronger now," Kevin observed one night, as we reviewed our budget, working together to balance my parents' needs with our children's future, not despite what happened, but because of how we faced it together. He was right. The revelation that had initially seemed like the destruction of our family had ultimately led to more authentic relationships, stripped of pretense and built on a foundation of hard-earned truth. One unexpectedly positive outcome was the strengthening of connections with other family members. Aunt Patricia and Uncle George had remained steadfast supporters throughout the ordeal, offering practical help and emotional reassurance when we needed it most. Cousins I had barely spoken with in years reached out with messages of support, some sharing similar experiences that had previously been kept secret within their own immediate families. "Family secrets fester," Aunt Patricia told me wisely. "Bringing things into the light, however painful initially, is always the path to healing." This truth resonated deeply with me. The shame and secrecy surrounding Natalie's theft and my parents' vulnerability had caused as much damage as the acts themselves. The relief of honesty, difficult though it was, had created space for genuine healing to begin. As summer progressed, I found myself increasingly able to reflect on the experience with a perspective that hadn't been possible in those first raw months. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed from an acute, overwhelming presence to a significant but manageable part of our family story. I began helping other families facing similar situations, connecting with a local nonprofit that provided resources for families dealing with elder financial abuse, sharing my experience, offering practical advice about documentation and legal protections, and simply listening without judgment became a meaningful way to honor the difficult journey we had traveled. One evening in late August, as I sat beside Mom during one of her good days, she took my hand and spoke with surprising clarity. "You know, Jessica, there's something I've learned through all this." I leaned closer, treasuring these moments of connection that had become increasingly precious as her condition progressed. "What's that, Mom?" "True freedom isn't about getting everything you want," she said, her eyes clear and focused. "It's about being at peace with what is, even when it's not what you would have chosen." Her simple wisdom struck me deeply. None of us had chosen this path. Not the betrayal, not the painful revelations, not the legal consequences or financial strain. Yet within these circumstances we hadn't chosen, we had found ways to create meaning, to preserve dignity, to rebuild connections on more authentic terms. This perhaps was the most profound lesson of our family's journey. That healing doesn't mean returning to what was before. It means creating something new from the broken pieces, something that honors both the pain of what was lost and the possibility of what might still be. Today, our family continues to navigate this path one day at a time. We celebrate small victories. Mom recognizing every grandchild during a visit, Dad laughing unreservedly for the first time in months, Natalie marking 1 year of gambling sobriety, Emma and Lucas developing compassion beyond their years. We also acknowledge ongoing challenges, the progression of Mom's condition, the financial constraints that will shape our choices for years to come, the trust that remains fragile and conditional between certain family members. Through it all, I've learned that true strength isn't found in preventing painful experiences or in pretending they don't affect us. It's found in facing reality with courage, in maintaining boundaries while leaving room for redemption, and in choosing love that's clear-eyed rather than blind. As I look toward the future, I wonder what your experience has been with family betrayal or difficult truths. Have you ever had to confront a painful reality within your own family? How did you balance justice with compassion? I'd be grateful if you'd share your insights in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you or might help someone facing similar challenges, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with them. Thank you for walking this journey with me today, and may you find the strength you need for whatever path you're traveling.